Hello and welcome to the Killen Report. Today we are turning the tables on Michael Killen and I'm interviewing him. I'm happy and honored to be doing this. So Michael, welcome to your own show.
Thank you, and Lori, I'm honored that you are interviewing me.
Well, thank you. Now Michael, you are an artist,
Yes.
a TV host,
Yes.
a radio host.
I'm rapidly becoming a radio host at Stanford Radio 90.1.
I'm very excited to hear that. I wonder if we can first start with your artistic painting focus. Now, you have paintings exhibited in such places as NASA, Stanford University, Governor Jerry Brown's office, and probably many more. And they have a specific focus. I know you have paintings with interesting names like sustainability, resilience in America, and beginning after the end. Can you tell us how you come about creating these very specific works?
Well, it's part of my ego and my pretentiousness. And my ego is I want to focus on some of the most fundamental, important issues of our time. So I believe sustainability is the era we are in. And somewhere we're all thinking about being more sustainable. But what does it look like, sustainability? And so I decided to make a 24-foot painting on sustainability. And I didn't come up with the idea. I came up with the idea for sustainability, but I was presented by a request from NASA to make a painting that would bring attention to a brand new building they were building called Sustainability Base. And, well, Sustainability Base, it would be good if I made a painting called Sustainability. That would help NASA bring attention to their new building and what they are doing in it. Yes,
and I know also that climate change is a big focus of yours, and I believe you've had paintings exhibited with that focus in mind.
Very definitely. I've tried to pick different important aspects of climate change, and I think I started early on. I made climate change for the wealthy. I made climate change for the rest of us. And then I made Don Quixote fights climate change. and then I made other paintings where we're fighting the great greenhouse gas monster.
And I think I've seen several of those on your website, which I think will be showing up on this video. Good. So I would like to take you back in time.
Sure.
And I read that when reading the information about you that you had an accident in 1996. And from that time forward until 2006, I believe, you weren't doing any art, but then something happened.
Well, I never did any art. I used to be the head of a market research and development company for about 35 years. And the only thing that really mattered to me was appealing to people's need for logic. You know, this was all how much money the world could make if they went in this direction or that direction. And art just was never a thought. And so I ran this company for 35 years, and then I had a full knee replacement that failed. And it took almost a decade to recover from it, and I had to give up my company, let it go dormant. It hurt me. I had to let my army of people go, and I lost my profession. So all of a sudden, after almost a decade, one of the operations took, and the pains started to decrease. And it was then that I started to become an artist.
And I think there's a friend of yours that's involved with that. His name is Leonard Brager, is that correct?
Yes, Leonard Brager used to put on art critiques 1 week he'd be in the East Bay putting one on for a day, and then San Francisco, Palo Alto area. And my wife was much more into art. Well, she was really into art, and she would drag me along, and I couldn't do much else, because I was a little incapacitated. Mm-hmm. And Leonard one day said to me, "Michael, I want you to come to my house. I want to get you started as a painter." And I said, "No, thanks." Next month. Finally, and I think we should never do anything because we feel sorry for people, but I started to feel sorry for this man. How many times can I say no? And so I went to his studio one day, and he put canvases out, water out, brushes out, and he says, "Here's how you wet your brush." And he said, "Paint." And I said, "Leonard, there's nothing I want to paint." And I think he cursed at me. And he walked over to the door, and he said, "I'm going for a walk for half an hour. Stick your hand in that bucket. I don't care what you do. And I'll be back in a half. Goodbye." And so I just picked up a paintbrush and went like that. And I picked, within 5 minutes, like never in my life, never in any other field, it spoke to me. And I said, "Well, let me make that line a little bit like this. Let me put a little green there. Well, it's a little lighter green." It instantly spoke to me. It was a profound experience.
I love to hear about how artists, what their process is. And I have a line from you said, "I went wild."
I really was. I suffer a bit from manic moods, and I was in a manic mood because I still had some problems with the pain and everything. And I decided to go like mad to obtain some level of mastery of painting. So I immediately painted Matisse's Blue Nude. Uh-huh. And then I painted Herman Monk's The Scream. Yeah. And I did Picasso's Women of Avignon. Oh. And what happened is I would bring these to the art critique group, and I could see that I hadn't really captured Matisse's. I could see shortcomings. I didn't really capture fully or enough Picasso's Women of Avignon.
But I bet you learned a lot.
Oh, I learned a lot, yeah. Yes. But I was surprised at how the art was received by this group. And when I did the Women of Avignon, the group of artists reacted in such a way. One woman got up and walked across the room and said, "This guy is so audacious. I mean, he doesn't even know what cadmium yellow is, and what is he doing? He's painting the masters. The next thing he's going to do is Guernica." I was so ignorant. I didn't know what Guernica was. I went home and I asked my wife, and she said, "Well, it's one of his greatest." Oh my God, it's 20 feet long, 10 up. And I said, "Do we have a picture?" And she said, "What for?" And I said, if I'm audacious, I'm going to do it. And she said, don't even consider that because the palette is so limited. Mm. And it will be so difficult for you, a beginner. And I said, he did this in just blacks, whites, and grays, and it's difficult, huh? Well, I'll make it in Technicolor. And I went and painted Guernica. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, as I was telling you before the show, I went to art school, and that's one of the things that the teachers taught us to do, is recreate the masters, because you learn so much about technique and their color combinations, yeah, and mixing and creating different environments just from the change of a shade of color. Yes. So you were doing that just spontaneously.
Yes, and then I want to add, fortunately my wife has an art background, so she helped me a lot. And then I bunked into this fellow named Harry Cohen from Marin County.
Yes.
And this is one of his paintings. And Harry put me under his arm and started sharing great insights with me, and he helped me move along very quickly.
That's great. That's wonderful. And so we're going to move to another area of your creativity, and it's kind of all creativity all the time with you. I'd like to talk a little bit about your TV work.
Sure.
Now, you know that I do a show here, and I'm always interested in people who do interviewing. Excuse me for moving on these pages around. I'm still a novice at this. When you invite guests to your show, how do you choose them? Who do you know? What's your idea about who you want to interview?
To some extent, it is related to the next painting I am making.
Oh, interesting.
Like my very last painting was to interpret Secretary George Shultz's recommendation to Congress and the new president for national energy and climate change direction of the nation. So I'm not necessarily born with an understanding of what George is thinking about for national energy and climate change. So I look over his shoulder a bit, and then I invite guests who might be real experts in some aspect of climate change or energy policies, what's happening in Washington or Sacramento. They become my guests, and I might not even say to them what I'm doing, but I help them share their message, because they're desperate to share their message, and we're in a great battle with climate change. So, and then that leads to a guest. It leads to me having insights to make a painting. Or sometimes it's some other project I'm working on. For example, I am further syndicating my TV shows. So I come to CMCM, right, which is what we are right here, Marin TV, and I do an interview with the executive director of this organization.
Michael Eisenmenger, I worked on that show.
Yes. And I want to learn about the thinking of executives of TV stations so that I know how to approach heads of stations across the entire United States. So a lot of things I do is very much related to my projects.
Yes, so you're very focused on moving forward in this particular field. I know you've done 50 annual shows syndicated, and you're expanding them, and now you're getting involved with radio. But before we go there, I just want to say you've interviewed so many diverse people, so many diverse professions. You've interviewed Paul Ehrlich and Anthony Barnowski, John Pearlstone, the health and fitness person, and Harry Cohn, of course, Elise Donahue, just amazing people.
Oh.
How do you, yes.
Let me throw the son of the Prime Minister of Singapore. That was one.
Yes.
The executive director of MasterCard for Europe. The Minister of Post and Telecommunication of Germany.
And these are all on YouTube.
Yeah, they're all on YouTube now.
I was up late last night watching these.
Okay, so how do I get my guests?
How do you get them? Well, you choose them based on what you're working on.
To an extent.
To an extent. I mean, I know that your focus is climate change and the current political climate in the country.
Yes, so the way I get my guest is I decide on an issue, a topic that interests me. You know, I think you have to be very curious.
Yes.
And this is to some extent the world of news. And so I study that topic a bit, and then I identify the person who I think could help me increase my understanding of the topic and would be of interest, and that I know that person is basically struggling to share their important message. And when you just inform the person that you know what they are about, what they are trying to do, it becomes relatively easy to get them to agree to do a show.
And there are 3 important things that you have learned doing TV interviews, and being a talk show host. And you mentioned in an email to me a bullet list that you create. So
A bullet list.
Important things.
Oh, okay. All right. With a guest, to have some structure, I often start a show off, or at some point I would say to you, Lori, give me the 3 most important topics or issues that you are concerned with. And let's say in making TV shows, what are the 3 most important topics? And don't give me a sentence after sentence. I just want the bullets. And then I say to myself, I got that bullet. I better remember each one of them. And after you said the bullet, then I come back and say, let's talk about bullet number 1. So that gives me structure. The guests may not know I'm doing that, but it also gives the structure the guest needs. So that's one of the things I do. Another thing I do in planning a show, I try to see the half-hour show in 3 pieces. And one could be the past. Like, how did you get to be a talk show host? What are you doing now as a talk show host? What will you be doing a year or 2? So it's almost always it could be strategies, principles, actions. You know, I always look for 3 related things.
So let me ask you, how did you get to be a talk show host?
It was an accident. But I was a publisher running my company, publishing market research studies. And one of the ways we sold our study was to issue press releases out and big mailing lists. But I also knew it would be wonderful if television anchors talked about my work sometime. And it's hard to get them to do that. But I valued television. I valued it. And then I wrote a book. It's a computer science book. And the publisher sent me around the United States about 10, 12 different radio stations, TV, NBC in San Francisco. And then one of them in San Jose, talk show host, did an interview with me. And at the end of the interview, he went like this. He's exhausted. And I said to him, Charlie, you tired? He says, yeah, I'm tired, you know. Yeah, I do a show every week. I have done a show for 4 years now, and I haven't had a single vacation. And I said, can't you get somebody to take your place? And he said, no. You can't just walk out on the street and get some business executive or whatever and say, take my place. You know, you got to know something to be a talk show host. And he said, you. I said, me? And I liked where it was going. And he said, you could take my place. And I said, would you do that? And I said, sure. And he said, next week.
Wow.
And I remember my heart went like this, boom, boom, boom. I show no fear. And I said, of course I'll take your show. He says, go get a guest, be here next week at this time.
That's wonderful, and you did it.
I did it, yeah.
And that's how it began.
That's how it began. And he said, he said he was going to go on vacation. He didn't. I mean, it's luckily, you know, because you need a coach.
What did he do, stick around and watch you do his
He
show?
became the director.
Oh, I see.
And then he said at the end of the first show, why don't you do another one? And then he said another one.
Oh.
And then he said, let's make a deal. He'll become the man behind the scenes, running the business, whatever, and I'll be the talent. That's how I got into being.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And he saw your skills and abilities right away.
I guess so.
Comfort level, in front of the camera, all of that.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and why do you continue to make TV shows? Why do you?
Well, today I'm very much driven by, I remember when Trump was elected, and there was 1 or 2 stations were showing my show, broadcasting my show, and I thought the world was becoming a little confused, and I decided to significantly go to about 50 TV stations, syndicated, and I feel there's this fake news and these other issues and climate change, and the scientists are dying for help sharing their climate message. And I'm at a stage of my life, what else can I do that's more important than helping government officials, politicians, scientists, energy experts share their message today? So that's what I'm doing.
Yes. And very well. It's just wonderful to watch your shows and see people come alive, and they seem so energized to be talking about the things that they love and they're so much a part of. So there are a couple of questions that I wanted to ask about how you choose your guests. You did talk about that, but you have an ability to make your guest relax. And I just mentioned to you that one of the things you do, it seems, since I've been watching your shows, is you are relaxed immediately yourself. And you can almost see physically people in front of you or next to you just go, I can relax too.
Well,
It's quite amazing how you do that. Do you have any other secrets to being a good interviewer?
Well, I want to say I may look relaxed, but there's a lot of things going on in the head. And as you know, there's a time, 28 and a half minutes. I have to get things accomplished in that amount of time. I have to draw the guest out and help that guest share their message. So I'm very delighted to hear my relaxed appearance, but the arms flaring, I don't know.
And I have actually several more questions, but I have an important question for you. A couple more before we end. And one is that I want to know where you're headed from here. What's your...
Well, okay. In terms of syndication, I want to increase the number of TV stations across the United States from 50 to some number. Also, I'm spending a lot of time right now at Stanford Radio, and I'm learning how to be a radio talk show host. And I think I'm going to have a show called Climate Issues. And then as soon as in another month, that show will start most likely. And then as soon as I get a little more familiarity with the system in a radio talk show host, I will syndicate the show.
Wonderful.
I will look to have about 50 radio stations as soon as possible running the show.
That's incredible and wonderful. And we'll have that information on the lower third in this show. One last question. This is my question. This is the surprise question.
I'm getting anxious already.
Don't be too anxious. We have about 5 minutes left. If you could interview anyone, living or dead, who would you interview and why would you choose them?
Albert Einstein, because he did something that we can all benefit from. He was dealing with all these concepts, mathematical and physical concepts that were hard for everyone to understand, and he decided on a way to pull it all together. He found something he could stand on, the speed of light.
Yes.
And all of us, when we get confused about things, if we look for what we can stand on, we can deal with. Bob Dylan. I would love to do Bob Dylan. And I actually made at least one painting inspired by him, Knock, Knock, Knocking on Heaven's Door. Sondheim, the lyricist who wrote, among others, Send in the Clowns. I mean, these are songs, like Send in the Clowns is something that has an emotional impact on me. Yeah. Who else would I want to do? Oh, Obama would be fun. I'm not going to try to do that, though.
Any women?
Women.
Oh,
Women.
no.
The former governor of Michigan, I can't remember her name right now. I plan to do a show with Lynn Orr. He's a former Undersecretary of the United States Department of Energy, and he's an icon at Stanford. I'm going to do him soon. I haven't thought too much about who
you would like to do. Well, that was a trick question, and I caught you off guard. But wonderful.
Jerry Brown.
Jerry
Governor
Brown
would be, and the head of the high-speed train project for California would very much interest me.
I'm sure he would come on your show. It's you mean the SMART train, the Marin County?
The high-speed one that's going to, yeah. But I would do the one for Marin and this area, that, projects that improve productivity and reduce energy emissions and help people, heads of projects like that interest me a lot.
Okay, that sounds wonderful.
And you?
Me? We have 2 minutes left. I can only take a minute of your time. Let me just say one thing, and I'd like you to fill in the gaps for this. One of the other things that I think disarms your interview subjects, your guests, is that you're not perfect. Your words, your ideas, they are not so rehearsed that they're perfect. That is also disarming, because that also makes someone relaxed and say, I don't have to be perfect. I can just be myself. And I love how that causes the flow of conversation so that it has a natural,
and there's another thing related on it. Sometimes, as you know, as a host, you really know more than your guest on some topics. Never outsmart the guest, and try not to show off on the show. That's what I try, not to show off and not to outsmart the guest. Help the guest articulate what is important to them that's also important to the audience. I don't help them too much if they're dealing with issues that do not have what I perceive as value to the audience. But
well, you definitely bring out people's personality and the colors. They're, thinking of painting. You paint your interviews in a way. You use your artistic talents to create a painting with your interviews. It's very, for me especially, it's very interesting and informative, since I'd like to do more of that myself. And so you've talked about how you'd like to move forward. Do you have any plans for any new paintings, any more?
No. I'm consumed by syndication. I'm consumed by the radio. That'll pass soon. But I am thinking, Stanford has a huge conference coming up. 3 different foundations are sponsoring it in a few months on resilience. And I'm probably going to do something. And then Jerry Brown has his big conference in September of 2018. And I think I should provide something special to help his conference be a success. And
I'm sure you will.
So
Michael, we're going to have to end there. And I wonder if you have a last word. We don't have to have a last word. This is probably going to cut. But I do want to say thank you so much for allowing me to interview on your show. It's been an honor and a special pleasure for me. I've learned so much.
It is my honor. Thank you very much, Lori.
You're welcome.